The luxurious penthouse gleamed under the soft glow of ambient lighting, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's dazzling skyline. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Ethan Cole stood by the grand piano, his posture rigid and his hands clenched into fists. Across the room, his parents, Margaret and Gregory Cole, sat with expressions as cold and unyielding as the marble floors beneath their feet. "Ethan," Margaret began, her tone sharp, "this isn't up for debate. The wedding is in a month, and you will marry Charlotte Whitmore." Ethan scoffed, pacing like a caged animal. "Charlotte Whitmore? Are you serious? I barely know her. She's practically a stranger." "She's a Whitmore," Gregory interjected, his deep voice rumbling like thunder. "That's all you need to know. The Whitmore partnership will secure the future of Cole Industries. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Beneficial for you, maybe," Ethan snapped, turning to face them. "But not for me. I won't marry someone I don't love. This is my life, not a corporate merger." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your life is a privilege, Ethan, one that we've worked tirelessly to provide for you. The least you can do is honor your responsibilities." "My responsibilities," Ethan repeated, his voice rising. "What about my happiness? Or does that not matter as long as the company thrives?" Margaret's gaze turned icy. "You're being dramatic. Love isn't the priority here, stability is. Charlotte is a smart, capable woman from a reputable family. She's perfect for you." "She's perfect for you," Ethan countered, his frustration boiling over. "This isn't about me at all." Gregory stood, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. "Enough, Ethan. Either you follow through with this marriage, or you can consider yourself cut off, from the family, from the company, from everything." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. "You'd really do that? Disown me for not playing along with your plans?" Margaret stood as well, her gaze unwavering. "We won't have to, because you'll do the right thing." The room fell silent, the weight of their ultimatum settling like a lead blanket. Ethan turned away, staring out the massive windows at the glittering city below. "This conversation is over," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Get out." Margaret and Gregory exchanged a glance, then gathered their things and left without another word. The sound of the door closing echoed through the penthouse, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. Later that evening, Ethan found himself wandering the streets of Chicago, his mind racing. The cool night air bit at his skin as he walked aimlessly, trying to think of a way out. He couldn't let his parents control him, but their threats were real. Losing everything he'd built wasn't an option. As he turned a corner, his steps faltered. A young woman sat on the sidewalk, leaning against the side of a building. Her backpack, worn and frayed, rested beside her, and she was huddled in an oversized jacket that did little to shield her from the cold. Her head lifted as he approached, revealing striking green eyes framed by messy brown hair. Her gaze was wary, but there was a quiet strength in it that caught Ethan off guard. "Spare any change?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Ethan stopped, studying her for a moment. "What's your name?" She hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to strangers asking for more than her request. "Leela," she said finally. Ethan's mind raced, a wild idea taking shape. "Lila," he repeated, crouching slightly to meet her gaze. "What if I told you I could change your life?" Her brow furrowed. "I'd say you've been watching too many movies." Ethan let out a short laugh. "Fair. But I'm serious. What if I told you I could get you off the streets, give you a place to live, food, clothes, everything you need to start fresh?" She narrowed her eyes, suspicion creeping into her voice. "What's the catch?" Ethan straightened, shoving his hands into his coat pockets. "You marry me. For a year." Lila stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "What?" "I'm not crazy," Ethan said quickly. "I just need a wife. It's complicated, but it's just a business arrangement. You'll have everything you need, and after a year we'll part ways. No strings attached." Lila shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "This is some kind of joke, right? Marry you? A total stranger?" "I'm serious," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'll draw up a contract. You'll be protected. And I'll pay you enough to get back on your feet for good." Lila studied him, her guarded expression softening slightly. "Why me?" Ethan hesitated, the answer clear but too vulnerable to voice. "Because you don't know me. And you don't care about my money or my status. You're real." Lila looked down at her hands, her thoughts swirling. The offer was outrageous, but so was her reality. She had nothing to lose, and maybe everything to gain. "Okay," she said finally, meeting his gaze. "But if you're lying, I'm out." "I'm not," Ethan promised. As they shook hands to seal the agreement, neither of them realized how much that moment would change their lives. Lila sat in the warm glow of Ethan's penthouse, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her coffee cup. She looked out the massive windows at the glittering Chicago skyline, a stark contrast to the streets she had called home for the past year. The plush surroundings felt surreal, like a dream she didn't belong in. Ethan sat across from her, watching her carefully. His tailored shirt and polished demeanor were so far removed from her world that she could barely believe they were having this conversation. "So," she began cautiously, "you want me to marry you, just to get out of another marriage?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but resolute. "That's the gist of it." Lila let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You don't even know me." "That's the point," Ethan replied. "You're not like the people I usually deal with. You're honest, real." Lila's gaze sharpened. "You don't know that. I could be lying to you right now." "Then why aren't you?" Ethan countered, his eyes steady. Lila looked away, her chest tightening. His confidence unnerved her, but the offer was tempting, too tempting. A year ago, Lila's life had been unrecognizable. She had lived in a modest but cozy home with her father, her days filled with music and dreams of performing on grand stages. Her father, a fiercely independent man, had taught her to play the piano and guitar, encouraging her talent at every turn. But everything changed when her father fell ill. The mounting medical bills quickly drained their savings, and the home Lila had grown up in was sold to cover expenses. When he passed, she was left with nothing but a few personal belongings and her battered guitar. Pride kept her from asking for help. She tried to make it on her own, playing on street corners and in small coffee shops, but the gigs weren't enough to pay rent. Slowly, she slipped into homelessness, clinging to her music as the only remnant of her old life. Despite her struggles, Lila refused to give up. She survived day by day, guarding her dignity fiercely. Even now, faced with Ethan's outlandish proposal, her instinct was to walk away. "I don't know," she said finally, breaking the silence. "It sounds insane." Ethan leaned forward, his voice softening. "I get it, but this isn't a scam and it's not about love. It's just a business arrangement. You'll have everything you need, food, clothes, a place to stay, and I'll help you start over. In a year, we'll go our separate ways." Lila studied him, her instincts battling her desperation. "What's in it for you?" "My parents," Ethan said, his tone laced with frustration. "They're forcing me into an arranged marriage to merge two companies. If I'm already married, their plan falls apart." Lila frowned. "So, I'd just be your cover story." "Essentially," Ethan admitted. "But I'll make it worth your while. You'll have complete control over the terms, your privacy, your freedom, everything." Lila's fingers tightened around her cup. The idea of tying herself to a stranger felt dangerous, but so was the alternative, returning to the streets with no clear future. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then I'll find someone else," Ethan said honestly. "But I hope you'll consider it." She hesitated, weighing her options. The risks were enormous, but so was the opportunity. "Fine," she said at last, her voice steady. "But if this goes sideways, I'm out." Ethan nodded, relief flashing across his face. "Fair enough. I'll have my lawyer draft the paperwork tomorrow." As Ethan walked her to the door, Lila paused, glancing at him over her shoulder. "You're taking a big risk, you know. What if I turn out to be a nightmare?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I guess we'll both be gambling." Lila gave him a small, uncertain smile before stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. What Ethan didn't know, what no one knew, was that Lila wasn't just a struggling musician. She was Lila Hanover, the estranged daughter of Jonathan Hanover, a once powerful business mogul who had fallen from grace in a high-profile scandal years ago. Lila had spent her entire adult life distancing herself from her family's name, determined to carve out her own path. If Ethan ever found out who she really was, everything could come crashing down. As the elevator descended, Lila whispered to herself, "You can handle this. It's just a year." But deep down, she knew nothing about this arrangement would be simple. The first morning in Ethan's penthouse was surreal for Lila. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the sleek marble countertops and high-end appliances, feeling completely out of place. The fridge was stocked with imported delicacies she couldn't pronounce, and the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows was enough to make her dizzy. "Coffee?" Ethan's voice startled her as he entered the room, casually dressed in a fitted t-shirt and jeans. Sure," Lila replied, her eyes still scanning the room as if it might vanish. Ethan poured 2 cups and handed her one, watching as she cautiously took a sip. "You look like you're waiting for the ceiling to collapse." Lila smirked. "It's just a lot. I've never lived anywhere like this." "You'll get used to it," Ethan said, leaning against the counter. "Consider it part of the arrangement." She raised an eyebrow. "Right. The arrangement. Married one day, strangers the next." He chuckled. "It's unconventional, I'll give you that. But you'll be fine. You're tougher than you look." Lila didn't respond, instead taking another sip of coffee and staring out at the skyline. She couldn't help but wonder how long she could keep up this charade. Over the next few weeks, their vastly different lifestyles became increasingly apparent. Lila's independent nature clashed with Ethan's world of wealth and privilege. She insisted on making her own meals instead of relying on the housekeeper, much to Ethan's amusement. "I didn't think it was possible to burn eggs," Ethan teased one morning as she scraped a charred mess off a pan. "Don't start with me, Mr. Perfect," Lila shot back, though her lips twitched with a reluctant smile. Despite the awkward start, they found a surprising rhythm. Ethan was impressed by Lila's quick wit and sharp observations, while Lila began to see glimpses of vulnerability beneath Ethan's confident exterior. One night, she found him in his home office, staring at a photo on his desk. It was a picture of Ethan as a child, sitting on his father's lap. "You look happy," she said, leaning against the doorway. Ethan glanced up, startled, before turning the photo face down. Appearances can be deceiving. Lila stepped closer, her curiosity piqued. "What happened?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "My parents have always been controlling. They see me as an extension of the company, not as a person. My entire life has been about meeting their expectations." Lila frowned. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," Ethan admitted. "That's why I had to get out. This whole marriage thing, it's not just about defying them. It's about proving I can make my own choices." Lila nodded slowly, her initial skepticism softening. "I get it, more than you know." One evening, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered through the penthouse and heard faint music coming from the living room. He followed the sound and found Lila sitting at the old upright piano tucked into the corner. Her fingers danced over the keys, creating a haunting melody that filled the space. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice him at first. "You're incredible," Ethan said softly when the piece ended. Lila jumped, turning to face him. "I didn't know anyone was listening." "I didn't know you could play," he replied, stepping closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's not something I talk about much. Just a part of my past I'd rather keep private." Ethan studied her, sensing there was more to the story, but he didn't push. "Well, you should play more often. You've got real talent." Lila offered a small smile. "Maybe." The arrangement faced its first true test at a charity gala a few weeks later. Ethan had to introduce Lila as his wife, and she felt completely out of her depth. "You'll be fine," Ethan assured her as they stepped into the opulent ballroom. "Just smile and nod." "Easy for you to say," Lila muttered, smoothing the hem of her borrowed evening gown. As they mingled, Lila surprised herself and Ethan with her ability to navigate the crowd. Her natural charm and quick thinking won over several influential guests, even leaving Ethan's skeptical parents momentarily speechless. "Your wife is quite the charmer," one guest remarked to Ethan. "Yes," Ethan said, his gaze lingering on Lila. "She is." But the evening wasn't without its challenges. Margaret Cole pulled Lila aside, her polished smile thin and cold. "You played your part well tonight," Margaret said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Thank you," Lila replied evenly, refusing to be intimidated. Margaret's smile faded slightly. "But don't think for a second that I'm fooled. I know there's more to you than meets the eye, and I'll find out exactly what you're hiding." Lila's breath hitched, but she kept her composure. "Good luck with that," she said, turning on her heel and walking away. As the night wore on, Lila couldn't shake Margaret's words. She knew the truth about her past would come out eventually, but when it did, what would it cost her? Back at the penthouse, Ethan noticed her quiet mood. "You okay?" Lila forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." But as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she knew this arrangement was growing far more complicated than she'd ever anticipated. The cold precision of Margaret Cole's study was a stark contrast to the warmth of the rest of the Cole mansion. Margaret sat at her desk, her laptop open and a thick dossier spread before her. The face staring back at her from the screen was unmistakably Lila's, though younger and surrounded by headlines that screamed scandal. "Hanover Empire collapses in fraud scandal." Margaret's lips curled into a thin smile. She picked up the phone, dialing Ethan. Ethan was in his office, reviewing a new project proposal when his phone buzzed. Seeing his mother's name, he hesitated before answering. "What is it, Mother?" Margaret's tone was clipped. "We need to talk. It's about your wife." Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "What about her?" "She's not who she claims to be," Margaret said. "Come to the house. Now." The tension in the Cole mansion was palpable as Ethan entered the study. Margaret stood by the desk, the dossier open and ready. "What's this about?" Ethan asked, his patience thinning. Margaret gestured to the documents. "Your wife, Leila, is Leila Hanover. Ring any bells?" Ethan frowned, stepping closer to scan the pages. His eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. "Hanover, as in Jonathan Hanover?" "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "The disgraced mogul who lost everything in one of the biggest corporate frauds of the decade. That's her father." Ethan shook his head, trying to process. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she's been hiding it," Margaret said sharply. "Think about it, Ethan. She's using you. This is her way of clawing her family's reputation back from the ashes." Ethan clenched his jaw, his mind spinning. "You don't know that." Margaret stepped closer, her voice low and biting. "Don't be naive. You've been played. She's not some innocent street musician you rescued. She's a Hanover. This was her plan all along." Ethan returned to the penthouse, his thoughts a storm of doubt and anger. Lila was in the living room, sketching something on a notepad. She looked up as he entered, her smile fading at the intensity of his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting the notepad aside. Ethan crossed his arms, his tone colder than she'd ever heard. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Lila froze, her breath catching. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb, Leila," Ethan snapped. "I know you're Leila Hanover, daughter of Jonathan Hanover, the man who nearly destroyed countless lives." Lila's face paled, but she stood her ground. "So what? You went digging into my past." "I didn't," Ethan said sharply. "My mother did. And she thinks you're using me to restore your family's reputation. Is she right?" Lila's hands balled into fists. "You think I wanted this? You think I chose to be his daughter? I've spent my whole life running from that name." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Ethan demanded. "Why keep it a secret?" "Because it's not who I am," Lila shouted, her voice cracking. "I've spent years trying to escape the shadow of my father's mistakes. The name Hanover ruined my life, Ethan. I lost everything, my home, my family, my dreams. All I've ever wanted was to be Leila, just Lila." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his anger battling with the flicker of understanding her words ignited. "So, none of this was real. It was all just convenient." Lila stared at him, her chest heaving. "You don't get it, do you? I never asked for this arrangement. You came to me. You needed me. And somewhere along the way, I thought maybe, just maybe, you saw me for more than my past. But I was wrong." Ethan looked away, the weight of her words pressing on him. Lila grabbed her backpack, her voice trembling. "You know what? Maybe your mother's right. Maybe I don't belong here, but at least I know who I am. Can you say the same?" She walked past him, her steps quick and determined. "Lila," Ethan called, his voice softer now. She paused at the door but didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Ethan." And then she was gone. The penthouse felt impossibly quiet after she left. Ethan sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. The truth had shaken him, but the way he'd handled it made his chest ache with regret. He stared at the photo of them from the charity gala, her radiant smile so genuine it made his earlier accusations feel hollow. Ethan buried his head in his hands, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Ethan sat alone in the penthouse, staring at the grand piano in the corner of the room. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of the city outside. His mind replayed the confrontation with Lila, her raw, anguished words echoing in his ears. "At least I know who I am. Can you say the same?" He had been so quick to judge, blinded by his mother's manipulation and his own insecurities. Lila wasn't using him, she had been surviving, fighting to reclaim her life, despite the shadow her father's name had cast over her. Ethan closed his eyes, the image of Lila sitting at the piano with her fingers dancing over the keys flashing through his mind. She wasn't defined by the Hanover name or the scandal. She was her own person, brilliant, resilient, and honest. And he had let her slip away. Meanwhile, Lila's world had shifted. After leaving Ethan, she returned to what she knew best, her music. She started playing at small venues, her confidence growing with each performance. At a cozy jazz bar downtown, Leela sat on a stool with her guitar in hand. The audience was small but attentive, captivated by the soul in her voice and the passion in her melodies. When she finished her set, the applause was genuine and warm, a balm to the wounds Ethan's accusations had left behind. For the first time in years, Lila felt like she was reclaiming her identity, not as a Hanover, but as an artist. "Your voice is amazing," a man said as she packed up her guitar. "Have you thought about recording?" Lila smiled politely but shook her head. One step at a time. Back at the penthouse, Ethan couldn't shake the emptiness Lila's absence had left. Desperate to make amends, he turned to Claire, his trusted assistant. "She's amazing, Claire," Ethan said, pacing the room. "And I blew it. I need to fix this." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly subtle about it, Ethan. So what's your plan?" "I don't know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I can't let her go. Not like this." Claire thought for a moment, then smiled. "If music is her world, maybe you should speak her language." Inspired, Ethan threw himself into a plan. He reached out to venue owners and industry professionals, pulling every string he had to organize a private concert. But this wasn't just any concert, it was for Leela. He tracked her performances, showing up discreetly at one of her gigs to hear her play. Watching her pour her soul into the music, he felt his heart swell with pride and determination. 2 weeks later, Leela received an unexpected invitation. It was a handwritten note delivered to her apartment. "Lila, you deserve to be seen, to be heard. Please come to the Grand Avenue Theater tomorrow at 7 p.m. Curiosity and skepticism warred within her, but something about the note compelled her to go. When Leela arrived at the theater, her breath caught. The space was intimate yet elegant, lit by soft golden lights that highlighted a grand piano center stage. The small audience consisted of familiar faces from the music industry, people she had admired from afar but never dreamed of meeting. As she stepped inside, a man approached her with a warm smile. "Lila Hanover?" he asked. Lila tensed at the name but nodded. "I've been hearing about your music. I'm excited to hear you play tonight." "Play?" Lila asked, confused. The man gestured toward the stage. "This is your show." Before she could process his words, Ethan appeared, looking nervous but determined. "Ethan," she said, her tone guarded. "What is this?" "It's for you," he said. His voice steady despite the tension between them. "I wanted the world to see what I see every time you play. This is your dream, Lila. Let me help you achieve it." Her heart raced as she took in the room, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. "I fell in love with you," Ethan continued, stepping closer. "Not your name or your past. Just you. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll let me." Lila swallowed hard, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Ethan, you didn't just give me a chance. You gave me my dream." He smiled softly. "Then maybe some things are worth another try." That night, Leela stepped onto the stage, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the piano keys. But as she began to play, all her doubts melted away. The audience was captivated, and when she finished her final song, the applause was thunderous. Ethan stood at the back of the room, his chest tight with pride and hope. When the theater emptied, Leela found Ethan waiting for her near the stage. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "I did," he replied, "because you're worth it." Lila studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Maybe we both are." As they left the theater together, the rift between them finally felt like it was beginning to heal. Ethan and Lila sat across from each other in the penthouse living room, the air between them no longer charged with anger, but filled with quiet understanding. "I don't expect everything to be perfect overnight," Ethan said, his voice steady yet vulnerable. "But I want us to move forward together. Not as strangers in an arrangement, but as partners." Lila studied him, her green eyes searching his face for any sign of deceit. All she saw was sincerity. "It won't be easy," she replied. "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." "I know," Ethan said, leaning forward. "But I'm willing to work for it. Every day, if that's what it takes." A small smile touched Lila's lips. "You're stubborn, you know that." "So are you," Ethan countered with a soft chuckle. They both laughed, the tension easing as they began to rebuild what had been broken. Over the next year, Ethan and Leela grew closer, their relationship transforming into something real. Lila continued to perform, her talent earning her recognition in the music industry. Ethan, ever her biggest supporter, stood by her side, attending every performance with pride. At the same time, Lila encouraged Ethan to take control of his life, helping him navigate his strained relationship with his parents. Gregory remained distant, but Margaret's icy demeanor began to thaw as she saw Leela's genuine love for her son. "She's stronger than I gave her credit for," Margaret admitted to Ethan one evening. "And so are you." Ethan nodded, his heart lightened by his mother's acceptance. 1 year to the day after their whirlwind marriage, Ethan planned a surprise for Leela. She had just finished a sold-out performance at a grand concert hall, the applause still echoing in her ears as she stepped backstage. "Wonderful show, Miss Hanover," a stagehand said, handing her a bouquet of roses. "Thank you," Leela replied, smiling as she took the flowers. As she turned the corner, she froze. The stage had been cleared, and Ethan stood in the center, holding a small velvet box. The remaining crew and a few close friends, including Jenny and Claire, stood in the wings, watching quietly. "Ethan," Leela said, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "A year ago, we started something that was supposed to be temporary. A deal. But somewhere along the way, you became my everything. You made me see the world differently. You made me better." Lila's heart pounded as he dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Lila Hanover," Ethan said, his voice steady, "will you marry me again, this time forever?" Tears filled Leela's eyes as she stepped closer. "Yes," she said with a laugh, wiping her cheeks. "But no more contracts." The audience in the wings erupted into cheers as Ethan slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. Their wedding was a simple yet elegant affair held in a garden under the stars. Guests from all walks of life, Ethan's business associates, Lila's music community, and even a few former rivals came together to celebrate their union. Margaret, dressed in a tasteful lavender gown, approached Lila as the reception began. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said, her tone genuine. "I misjudged you. You've shown strength and grace I didn't think possible." Lila smiled warmly. "Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know." The two women shared a brief, understanding nod before Margaret returned to her table. As the night wore on, Ethan and Lila shared their first dance under a canopy of fairy lights. The world seemed to fade away as they moved in perfect harmony, the soft music enveloping them. "I can't believe how far we've come," Lila whispered. Ethan smiled, his hand tightening around hers. "I can. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "And to think," Lila said with a laugh, "it all started with a crazy deal." As the stars twinkled above them, they knew that their journey, filled with challenges, heartbreak, and redemption, had brought them to a love neither of them could have imagined. As Ethan and Leela dance under the stars, their story reminds us that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even from a marriage of convenience. Their journey shows that trust, forgiveness, and resilience can transform any challenge into something extraordinary. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves stories of love and redemption. For more heartwarming tales like this, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next inspiring tale.